It was Halloween night in the town of Black Hollow. A thick, breathing fog wrapped itself around the streets, and a full moon hung in the sky like a pale, watchful eye. At exactly 6 minutes past 7, a blood-red envelope appeared in every mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Just a single, chilling line written in jagged ink. You are invited to the final Halloween. Most people shrug it off, a morbid prank for a morbid night. But not everyone. 13 curious, perhaps foolish, souls decided to accept the invitation. The address led them to Graven Hill, to an abandoned Victorian mansion. The locals called the Hollowing. The house had stood empty and silent since 1978, the year the entire Holloway family disappeared without a trace during their annual Halloween party. No bodies, no suspects, just a house sealed in silence for decades. But tonight, the silence was broken. The massive front doors creaked open, inviting the 13 guests into a world of dust and decay. The air inside was stale, heavy with the scent of forgotten things. Wallpaper peeled from the walls like sunburnt skin. In the grand foyer, a grandfather clock ticked away the seconds, its pendulum swinging with a life of its own, though no one had wound it for 40 years. The 13 guests stepped inside, a mix of nervous laughter and wide-eyed awe. And then, with a deafening boom, the door slammed shut behind them, plunging them into near darkness. A collective gasp echoed through the hall. Phones were pulled out, but there was no signal. They rushed to the windows, but they were sealed shut, as if part of the very stone itself. A low groan vibrated through the floorboards, and it felt as if the house itself had just taken a long, deep breath. They found their way to the parlor, where a dusty film projector suddenly flickered to life. A grainy, black and white image appeared on the wall. A figure cloaked in black, wearing the long, beaked mask of a plague doctor, stared out at them. Its voice, distorted and mechanical, crackled through an unseen speaker. "Welcome," it rasped. 13 of you have entered. Only one of you may leave. Every hour. On the hour, one will vanish. Your task is simple. Solve the secrets of this house, or become a permanent part of its collection. Uneasy laughter rippled through the group. It had to be an elaborate escape room, right? A high-tech Halloween haunt. The tension was part of the fun. Then, the lights went out completely, plunging them into absolute, suffocating blackness. The scream was cut short. A moment later, the lights flickered back on. They were no longer 13. Maya, the town florist, was gone, vanished. In the exact spot where she had been standing, a bouquet of perfect, jet-black roses lay on the threadbare carpet. A single drop of crimson, like a tear of blood, dripped from a petal onto the floor. The game was real. Panic erupted like a wildfire. The nervous laughter died, replaced by accusations and fear. They split into smaller groups, desperately searching for an exit, for any clue. But each room they entered held not a key, but a puzzle, a twisted memory, a buried sin. In the nursery upstairs, a music box began to play on its own, its melody a lullaby played in reverse. When they finally pried it open, they found not a ballerina, but a single, yellowed baby tooth and a slip of paper with a handwritten note. She drowned her child. Down in the kitchen, the ancient cast iron oven roared to life, its door glowing cherry red. A smell of burning filled the air. Inside, resting on the blackened rack, was a charred wedding ring. A new note appeared beside it. He burned his bride. In the attic, a large, ornate mirror stood draped in a dusty sheet. When they pulled it away, it didn't show their reflections. Instead, it showed their deepest regrets, playing out like silent films. Every guest had a secret they thought was buried forever. But the house knew. The house remembered everything. As the grandfather clock struck 9, the second guest vanished. Tyler, a podcaster who documented local legends, let out a choked gasp. "I hear static," he whispered, clutching his head. It's inside my head, and just like that, he was gone. His body was nowhere to be found, but moments later, his voice began to echo from an old radio in the study, whispering confessions he'd never made, secrets he had taken to his grave, now broadcast for all to hear. The house wasn't just taking them, it was feeding. Not on their flesh, but on their guilt. Desperate and terrified, the remaining guests huddled together and decided to hold a seance. They gathered in the dining room, lit a circle of candles, and held hands. The flames flickered, casting long, dancing shadows that twisted into grotesque shapes. And then they appeared, the Holloway family. But they weren't ghosts. They were hollow, empty shells of people. Their eyes were black voids, their mouths stitched shut with coarse black thread. They floated into the room, their feet not touching the floor, and one by one, they raised a single skeletal finger and pointed at the guests. A collective, sibilant whisper filled the room. "You brought this." One of the guests, Evelyn, a woman known for her vanity, let out a piercing shriek. She looked down at her hands and saw cracks appearing on her skin, spreading like a spiderweb across fine porcelain. Before anyone could react, she shattered, collapsing into a pile of fine, gray dust. By the time the clock began to chime for midnight, only four remained. There was Jonah, the priest who had lost his faith after a personal tragedy. Lexi, the social media influencer who had once faked her own death for online fame. Marcus, the disgraced ex-cop, haunted by the memory of a wrongful shooting. And Claire, the quiet, withdrawn girl who hadn't spoken a single word all night until now. As the final chime faded, Claire looked at the others, her eyes clear and filled with a strange resolve. "I lived here," she said, her voice steady. As a child, she was the sole survivor of the Holloway massacre all those years ago. She had escaped, but she hadn't come back for revenge. She had returned to finish what was started. She led them down to the basement, to a hidden chamber beneath the foundation. In the center of the room was a ritual circle etched into the stone floor. Around it were 13 unlit candles, and beneath each candle was a name, their names. The house wasn't haunted by ghosts. It was a lock, a prison, a living entity that stood on the veil between our world and something else. Every Halloween, it grew weak, and it demanded 13 souls to renew its power to keep the lock sealed. Claire hadn't brought them here as sacrifices. She had brought them here to find the one person strong enough to become the new key. The plague doctor appeared before them again, no longer a grainy image on a wall, but a solid, terrifying figure of flesh and bone. The choice must be made, it rasped. One stays, the rest go free. But the one who stays must carry the house and all its hunger inside them forever. Jonah, seeking redemption, volunteered. But a whisper from the walls rejected him. No faith. Lexi begged, offering her fame, her followers. The house seemed to laugh, a low rumble that shook the dust from the ceiling. Marcus wept, confessing his sins, offering his guilt as tribute. The house ignored him. Finally, Claire stepped forward into the circle. "I was born in this house," she declared. "I will die in it." A profound silence fell. The walls seemed to sigh in satisfaction. The house accepted. At dawn, the 12 survivors awoke in their own beds. They were safe. On Graven Hill, the hollowing was gone. The mansion had vanished completely. In its place was a field of black roses, glistening with morning dew. It all felt like a nightmare, a collective hallucination, but they knew it was real. Because every Halloween after that, each of the 12 received a single blood-red envelope. No stamp, no return address, and one by one, over the years, they heard the call of the house. And they returned. Thanks for watching this spooky tale. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more stories from the shadows, and ring that notification bell. Until next time, stay safe